Hello, everyone. Welcome to one of our final award spotlight screenings. We're really excited to have you all here for a conversation around couples therapy. Before we begin, I'm going to introduce myself. You probably all know who I am by this point, but my name is Cassidy Diamond. I am the Associate Director of Public Programs and Events here at the IDA. I would like to start, as always, with a brief land acknowledgement. I'm coming to you today from Los Angeles, which is on the unceded land of the Tongva and Chumash people, who have been stewards of this land for generations. I would also like to offer thanks to our sponsor, Variety, for helping bring this amazing series to all of you this spring. We're really excited to have them. I'd like to thank our ASL interpreter, Andrea Lust, for her services today and throughout this series. Thank you, Andrea. And at this point, you can see all of our past conversations on YouTube. Just go to IDA's YouTube channel and you can see this conversation again and all of our previous conversations there. And without any further ado, I'm going to hand things over to Libby Hill to get us started with this conversation. Welcome, Libby.
Thank you so much for having me, Cassidy. I'm so excited to be here today. As you all well know, we are here to talk about Showtime's fantastic reality series, Couples Therapy. With us today are two of the show's three creators, Eli Despres and Josh Kriegman, director Kim Roberts, and star of Couples Therapy, Dr. Orna Guralnik, America's therapist, is as we like to call her. Thank you all so much for unmuting and joining me today.
Glad to be here.
So I feel like I would be remiss if I didn't start our conversation by congratulating you about the season 3 pickup of Couples Therapy. Josh, Eli, did you have any idea when production started on this show that you were creating something that would spark such ardor in viewers?
No. Yeah, we had no idea what we were doing. It's amazing this thing has hummed and worked. It's surpassed any of our wildest dreams, in large part due to Orna's brilliance, but also the rest of our this team has been incredible. And we could hope, but we had no idea that we were going to create something. I think this crazily. To us, it feels unique and special, and yeah, we're over the moon that it seems to be trundling along so well.
I think that's exactly right. I mean, obviously we're thrilled, and in many ways, like when we started off with this, it was very much an experiment. Not only did we not know that it was going to go on for multiple seasons, but we didn't know whether it was entirely going to work in the first place. Trying to figure out how to capture therapy in a way that preserves the authenticity and the genuineness of it, but also while also filming it. I mean, that was kind of it felt like a wild experiment to us at the time. So it's been just absolutely thrilling that it's all working the way that it does.
And work it does. Dr. Orna, I feel that the show bringing you onto my TV and thus into my life has been a great boon for me personally, and I'm sure all audiences out there. But how has it been for you to incorporate this new facet of your professional journey into your work as an analyst?
It's been similarly surprising. I didn't expect this turn of events in my career, but the truth of the matter is it's been really wonderful. Both realizing the effect the show is having on such a large audience, and I'm generally, before doing this, I just work in a very small world with my patients and academically with my students, and suddenly to be able to share all my knowledge and the way I work with such a broad audience that don't usually get to see this kind of work feels like a real gift. It's been wonderful.
And absolutely, I definitely want to come back to reaching a wider audience a little later in this panel. Before we move on, though, I do understand that season 3 will be a little bit of a departure for this. Not a departure, but a kind of a slightly different format, with a longer episode run and 2 distinct segments to air in 2022. Can you speak at all to that decision, or are you just catering to fan demand that there is more couples therapy at all times?
Well, we obviously are believers in couples therapy, so we want to do as much of this as we possibly can. So it was a really wonderful opportunity and sort of outcome here, where we're going to be able to do kind of 2 installments of season 3 that each are following their own separate couples, same as we did in the first 2 seasons.
Brilliant. Kim, you have been with the series since the jump. In season 1, serving primarily as an editor, and then in season 2 as director. What was that transition like for you? And how did the roles compare?
I think they're related. I mean, I loved coming on in season 1 as the editor and helping to figure out a way to. I mean, we sort of invented the process in season 1 in terms of how to approach it, and how we basically arc out the entire therapy of all the couples before we start breaking it down into episodes, which was exciting to do, and also figuring out a way. I mean, this is the kind of the editing on this show is the sort of step back editing that I like, where it's sort of a little bit invisible. We really wanted to have a feeling of being in the room versus in a lot of reality TV, you can feel, I can at least really feel the manipulation going on. And so we wanted it, obviously we have to cut the therapy down, but we wanted it to feel very much like you're in there with them following the therapy. And then on season 2, I shifted into the director role and was working with some really great editors and helping show them, work with them on that same process. So it was fun at that point for me to take a step back and be able to go out to the set when we had a set and get involved in that and think about how to approach a couple things differently, but also really still preserving that fly on the wall in therapy feel, which is, I feel like, so critical for the show.
Right, which the process underwent some changes this season, which we will dig into momentarily. But couples therapy is a fascinating show because it goes a long way to demystify what happens within the confines of a therapy session. Dr. Orna, why do you think that's important for audiences, particularly ones who've never braved the confines of a therapist's office to begin with?
Well, there are 2 layers of demystification that this series is doing. One is demystifying what happens for couples when they meet impasses, which somehow culturally is often really held as quite a private, even secretive process. Like, couples like to present to the world a certain kind of front, and they don't share with others, even with close friends or family. They don't share the difficulties that they go through and how they work to resolve it. I mean, there's some kind of firewall around couples, especially when people are married. So that's one of the things that the series kind of peers into and demystifies, like what happens really for couples when they meet difficulties, and all couples do. I mean, all human beings, when they spend enough time with each other, they're going to meet their differences. And then there's the demystification of what happens in therapy, like what happens when you actually bring in someone else, a professional, to do the work with you. I mean, is the therapist going to be some kind of, I don't know, often in the media, the therapist is portrayed as someone either like super narcissistic or I don't know, after some other kind of agenda, and suddenly seeing the workings of what treatment is actually like, and even what someone like me, representing many more like me, what we go through, like how we actually do the work. I'm thinking about, like, for example, the supervision with Virginia, hiring a consultant, bringing someone in, just demystifying the whole process.
That's beautiful. Josh, when you all were conceptualizing, you and Eli and Elise were conceptualizing the series, was that part of your intent? Like, were you hoping to offer a window into this world that not everyone sees?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think one of the things that excites us most as filmmakers generally is finding ways to get to bring people into rooms that you don't typically get to be in, right? I mean, this is what we try to do in all of our documentary projects, and it's usually what gets us most excited. I mean, in this case, this came about because my both of my parents are therapists, so I grew up very much kind of familiar with the world of therapy and hearing stories of the kinds of things that can unfold in the therapist's office, struggles and breakthroughs, and just how extraordinary it is. And so I've been thinking for many years, just how remarkable it would be to be able to unveil that, but also this question of, is it possible? Is it possible to film the process without corrupting it or ruining it by the presence of the cameras and the reality of being filmed? So for sure, I mean, we were very excited about figuring out a way to expose something that you just don't normally get to see.
Let me slip my therapist hat on. Tell me about your parents, Josh. Just kidding. Like, that's a joke. It's fine. It's fine. You don't have to do that. Kim and Eli, talk to me a little bit about editing and direction when it comes to telling these stories. I've spoken to Dr. Orner a few times before, and she has absolutely mentioned how amazed she was at how those sessions translated to the screen. How do you figure out the through line of something that is much longer than what you're weaving together, and capturing the essence of what is happening in a session?
Well, what seems to happen in the course of therapy, of course, there's a lot of repetition that you're not seeing, right? So when we're actually creating the arc of therapy for each of the couples, it's I mean, you start off with maybe like 2 or 3 hour long string out of the key moments, and you start to see where those repetitions are and what in some ways, Orna has said, and I'm really fascinated with this, that there's a similarity in terms of what she's doing and what we're doing in the edit room, in terms of figuring out first what the narrative is that the couples are spinning, and then what's the underlying narrative that's going on, and where the turning points are, where the revelations are. And sometimes I can see them from the footage. Sometimes I'll miss it, and Orna will be like, go back to that session. There's something, that was a big moment. And then I'll go back and look and realize, yes, that's the moment. So it's figuring out what those turning point moments are in the sessions, and how to kind of convey the critical pieces that the couples are talking about. Because of course, there's also a lot of things that you don't see that couples bring to couples therapy that are important for them, but don't really tie into what their central dynamic is, what their circle is as a couple that they're needing to step out of.
Right. I get, okay. I'm trying to think of how to phrase this. This show is very different from what we have seen of kind of reality television as we know it. Is there any temptation at times to kind of, oh God, this feels like such a terrible question because I know the answer is no, but like, is there any temptation?
Orna says, say the terrible thing.
Yeah, say the terrible thing. I'm going to say the terrible thing. Is there any temptation to include that salacious detail or something that kind of made your jaw drop, just even if it didn't kind of function narratively?
I think there's maybe a flaw to the premise in that our goal is not to sort into salacious or not salacious. I think that our goal is to serve the sort of the truth of what the experience is like for this couple. So if someone did something insane in the room, we would not include it or not include it based on how dramatic it would cut into a teaser for the episode. It really has to do with how it relates to their story. It's not a concern for us. I mean, an advantage of the show, the reason that we don't need to indulge in sort of the manipulation of tension and dramatic stakes or whatever that some shows need to do is because we've created this world where this Orna's office is a duck blind for real high stakes human interaction, and so the demands on us are really just to get the other stuff out of the way.
Well, also, I think that we're with the couples long enough, and these are couples in crisis. There's real drama that is happening with them. And I think that in what we think of as reality TV, a lot of times you have a limited amount of time. And so there's a temptation to try to push things and foment things and create conflict that's false, right? And I think that one of the nice things is, I mean, we don't have to do that because all the conflict you see is what the couples are naturally bringing. And even if we had the temptation to make it like more, sexy, scandalous or whatever, it's there's just more than enough drama there for.
Look, I just want to say that you can see why I love working with these people.
That's exactly right. I mean, it's such a joy to be working on a project where getting to the heart of the matter is exactly where we want to be, right? There's no, we have just tremendous faith that and belief that if the closer we can cut to the actual truth of what's going on in this environment with in this context, the more powerful and compelling and gripping the material actually is at the end of the day. So it's all the pressures, I think, in the right direction for us.
Well, if I can button that, there's a we have a very sort of diverse group of subjects, clients on the show in terms of the problems that they have, where they come from socioeconomically, their cultural background, but they all have something very dramatic in common, which is they come into therapy usually with something that they're afraid to say and they need help communicating it, and there's a tension in that, and what Orna does is help them say the thing, figure out what the thing is and say it out loud, and then everything that throws into chaos their dynamic. I mean, it blows it up, which is always dramatic, but Orna's they don't have to be afraid of that, I think is part of what Orna's message is. And then that the second act of their story is always figuring out what that means, what that means for the relationship, and I mean, it's intrinsically a dramatic journey to be on, and then see where that lands them. There's this transformation that sort of naturally takes place once you've tossed that grenade into. Maybe the violent metaphor is the wrong one, but that disruption into their narrative.
If at the risk of sounding too much like a fangirl, like, I'm not sure you all understand how influential that is, even in viewers' lives. I, especially through the last 2 years, where we've all been dealing with some stuff, I've come to that point where you just have to say the thing, and inevitably, if you and your partner are on the same wavelength, you can generally push through that. And we're like, okay, that's the thing. Like, how do we solve the thing? And I think you're genuinely changing lives, which, congratulations, because that's not something every television show does. But let us take a moment and talk about those couples that you're bringing in. How are you choosing them? And I know that not every couple that you work with makes it on the show. So what are those choices like? I don't know who wants to take that one.
Well, it's a process, and it's one that we sort of we kind of invented along the way. I mean, we end up in terms of choosing couples, we end up interviewing something like 1,000 couples applies sort of for each season. So there's just this incredible influx of folks coming to us, and we sort through them, and the North Star, I think, that is kind of like always guides us, certainly through the selection of couples, but kind of in general, is authenticity. It's just really working hard to make sure that we find people who are genuine and who can be genuine in the context of doing this incredibly vulnerable and open thing in this on camera. And that is more than anything, I think that's kind of the bedrock quality that we're looking for. And then beyond that, I think we're also looking for just a kind of a diversity of stories and backgrounds and ethnicities, and every kind of diversity that is important to us, just to make sure that we're covering a real range of stories. So that is, I don't know, those are two of kind of the main qualities we're looking for.
Right. Have you found it challenging at all to gauge authenticity when you're dealing with couples? Not that people are coming to you with the intent to deceive, but sometimes in couples, people are deceiving themselves, which can translate otherwise. Have you run into any of that when trying to cast the show?
It hasn't been difficult at all. I don't think discerning authenticity, and the truth is that most people who come to us are in it. We're very upfront about that the therapy and the work is the most important thing, and so people aren't coming on thinking that they're going to be on Big Brother or whatever, a more manufactured environment show. They know that it's about the work. So the thing that is hard is figuring out like who Orna is going to have the most interesting time with. There are some couples that we think are going to be amazing, and Orna's like, got them done, and they're out, and then they're like happy in the second session, and we're like, darn it, that didn't work at all. So people who are articulate and have an emotional intelligence, but their issues are complicated enough that it's going to be worth playing out over 9 episodes. That is sometimes a gamble for us. We don't know necessarily what's going to happen.
Dr. Orna, before the patients land on your couch, are you brought into that process of choosing? What do you know about them before they come in? And can you gauge which nuts will be toughest to crack, or does it surprise even you sometimes?
Before I answer that, I just want to say something about authenticity, which is that authenticity is not like a commodity. It's not like something you have or don't have. It's the process. It's something that it's part of the work, which is to get people to a place where they're real or authentic with themselves and with their partner. And it's kind of a stop-go process. And then it happens, and one gets liberated and can speak. And then one meets resistances and authenticity goes down. So it's the process. It's part of the work. As far as being brought into the process, I think the way it's structured is very much to mimic the way it happens in regular life, which is typically I get a referral, I get like a few sentences about a couple or about a potential patient, and that's what I get. And if it sounds like this is someone that I really can't work with, then I'll say so, which is rare. Or if there's a red flag, like, oh, this might be someone at risk, then I might say something. But otherwise, I know very little, and I basically meet them the way I'd meet them in my regular office on camera.
Oh, wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Do you have a sense of when, and obviously every therapist tries to go in with an open mind, but how soon do you know that someone might be resistant to your therapeutic wiles?
Wiles.
Well, sometimes it's very obvious from the beginning that there's like someone who, like, either they're not really trusting of the whole project of therapy, or something about my style might suddenly hit someone in a way that there's an immediate reaction. And sometimes it takes a while to get to the edge. But the truth of the matter is, if the work is good and the work is real, then I'm going to get to people's edge, and I'm going to meet some kind of resistance where people need help to break through.
Right. And actually, what you said about authenticity is, it kind of blew my mind wide open just now, because authenticity is vulnerability. And if people don't feel safe, they can't feel vulnerable.
Right.
So they can't necessarily be read as authentic because they have walls up. And thank you. That's a lot to think about. Um, but your work this season specifically had additional challenges in making connections with your with the subjects because of the pandemic. How did that how did that journey challenge you specifically in trying to make sure you maintained that connection with your patients, subjects,
Um, so many
volunteers?
things, so many things. Well, one thing was just as we've all gone through this like maddening transition from real life to working mediated by technology. We're not in the room with each other, but we're like we're doing now, we're talking through a screen, which is in many ways, I mean, forget what you think, if it's good or bad or this, that, it's very different. And it's again kind of throws everything up in the air. Is this going to work? And am I going to manage to connect to people and get what they're struggling with, and intervene? Are we going to have enough of an impact on each other? Um, then there's the dimension of the fact that we're all going through something together. It's not, oh, these are participants that are coming to me with a particular crisis brewing in their life. This is something that suddenly we're all thrown into a maelstrom of like world crisis and all that came with it, not to mention the whole political upheaval we all went through and BLM. I mean, there was a lot that we were all going through at the same time. So it changes the dynamic of the treatment. And then just for all of us to be working remotely with each other, the whole production kind of worked remotely was difficult. So.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, as much as we'd like to kind of believe that each relationship is a closed system, we're all subject to that influence of the outside world. And the last 18 months have seen so much upheaval, like you said, calling for police reform, spurred by the Black Lives Matter protests, the ongoing tire fire that is the US political sphere, to say nothing of the global pandemic. How has that wormed its way into the participants on the show? Do you see, how did that manifest? Did it manifest as stress about the world, or did it manifest as stress about the world that was actually disguised at sort of what the underlying issue in their relationship was?
Yes, yes, and yes. All
Perfect,
of that.
done.
I mean, yeah. I mean, some people it was like concrete issues like, oh my God, there are kids at home and the stress of that, who's doing what, like role reversals in terms of who's taking what responsibility on. For some of them, it was much more obvious that what's happening in the outside world is completely expressed in what's going on between them. I mean, a good example is, there was little about that. That was maybe in the previous season, but just as an example, one person was a white policeman and married to a Black woman who was very involved in the BLM movement. So, I mean, in all of these, I mean, you can really walk one by one each couple and see how the outside world indeed worms its way into many of the difficulties between them and the beauty that characterizes their relationship.
Absolutely. Well, I want to ask you all a question that I hope is not too personal, but you're making this show, the pandemic crops up during production, and you are forced to audible. But you're forced to audible while also dealing with the pandemic as it affects you personally. How did you find that balance? Were you excited by the challenge? Were you able to distract yourself? Like, how'd you do it? Was it hard? Was it like
Balance?
Balance? Yeah.
fair?
Reject the premise.
Eli, you would reject all the premises of my questions. We're gonna switch jobs here.
I do think that I mean, we were scrambling personally and in the work just like everybody else. I mean, it was just completely insane. We were 3 weeks into production, into the therapy, shooting it the way that we normally had done, when everything got shut down and we were suddenly going, everything was shut down. And it was just this question of like, okay, well, what happens now? I mean, one thing that was interesting is it was immediately, I think in some ways our kind of documentarian instincts kind of kicked into high gear. And there was a sense of, we have to stay with the story, right? So we have to keep following what's happening here. We can't go dark for however many months and kind of come up later. And what we realized very quickly was, wow, we're actually in a really interesting place here. Like we sort of unwittingly situated ourselves in one of the more interesting places from which to consider the implications and impact of this worldwide phenomenon that's engulfed us all. And so that was in some ways exciting. And then it was just a question of, okay, well, technically, logistically, how do we keep capturing what's going on here? But we knew we had to stay in the heart of the story of, these relationships in the middle of the pandemic.
And if I can jump onto that, it's also sort of helpful and fascinating as a creator of documentary to be working on presenting something that you're struggling with yourself. So like we had 2 kids at home who have been remote schooling like everybody else in Los Angeles this entire year. So I would be like in the midst of working, looking at a couple struggling with their kids at home, when suddenly my kids wander into the room with their problems that, they're, and everybody's mental health in our home was at, all over the place this past year. But then to be able to jump in and work with Orna, who's also got, Orna, you can talk about, how hard it was for you. It's like, it's both hard and it's helpful is how I found it at the same time. And as Josh said, very exciting for documentarians to be in it, like to be in this, but also working on it creatively. It was very satisfying.
Yeah, I concur. I feel similar to what you said.
No. We need more than that.
Say more?
Say more.
Well, the being in the chaos together, and then there's something meaningful about working through it through the work. Meaning, while I'm working with clients, patients, participants, I'm doing the work myself too, trying to figure out what is this that we're all going through. Not like I'm sitting on the sidelines figuring it out and then coming into the treatment room and delivering some news. I'm figuring it out with the people. So it was very grounding for me too.
It felt very much like an exercise in empathy. When everyone is going through the same thing, you recognize it, you understand it, you feel bad for them, and then you feel bad for yourself, and that's nice sometimes. We're just about reaching the end of our chat, so Eli, I have a question. So you're all now several years into this journey with couples therapy. Do you have any insight into why this show resonates so strongly with its viewers?
I know why it works on me.
Please.
I grew up learning how people communicate from television, the 70s and 80s sitcoms. And so I think I as an adolescent and young adult I thought that banter and punchlines was how human relationships were constructed. Apparently that's not true. And I think outside of the therapy, just watching adult humans trying to interact sincerely and solve their problems in a really non-mediated. I know that Orna is there and helping them and ushering them and guiding, but it's not. And there are cameras there, but it's not for the cameras. And watching adults try to speak in a humane, compassionate, empathetic, and true way to each other is just eye-opening. You don't see that, with your friends. You have a dinner party and you are talking to each other, hopefully from the heart. But there is a non-performativeness to what happens in that room that I find jaw-dropping, and it's a wonder every time I watch any of the tape of our subjects. It knocks my socks off.
Can I add one thing to that, which is,
of course, you all can.
I think that there's, because of reality TV, there's this way that people watch shows where they like to pick sides and criticize this person or criticize that person. And because we're able in this show to follow a couple through around 20 weeks of therapy, the audience's experience of that is transformed, so that they're forced to reevaluate their own, knee-jerk assumptions and judgments as they watch people really honestly work on something. And that feels to me really exciting and different than what you're getting on other shows. I mean, real transformation that is internal and real and makes you, the audience member, realize that you shouldn't be rushing to all these judgments. Yeah. I guess I think is powerful.
Can I button that? Josh has got me hooked on looking up our show on Twitter, and sometimes you see someone watching the episodes, and like in episode 1, they're like, "I can't believe so and so," whatever, and then in the same Twitter thread, they're binging, and like they're on episode 3, and they're like, "Oh,
yeah,
oh, I had no idea, holy cow!" And you watch them like learn and about other people, and it's
and see themselves in it. Hopefully, you see yourself in every person in the show.
It's exciting.
That would be victory.
First of all, before you speak, Josh, please stop showing people my Twitter feed. But yes, what do you think?
No, I agree completely. I think that there is speaking more broadly, I think there's a kind of an appetite for what this is in some ways. Like, so much of our media and our culture right now is kind of this sort of celebration of conflict almost, right? I mean, you spend 10 minutes on Twitter, this political world that we're all living in now. It's like all, partisan battles and everyone kind of in their respective corners, like fighting it out. And I think that, this show, I think that some people come to this series thinking that maybe it's a similar kind of thing, like, ooh, we're going to see couples fight. And then what you realize is that this is not that at all. These are stories of reconciliation and empathy and love, and really trying to figure out, like, how do you reach across the couch and actually, meet somebody who has a completely different experience of the world than you do. And I just feel like there is, in some ways, I mean, I personally am excited to be adding that to the conversation and sort of be promoting those kinds of stories. And I think that there is an appetite for it.
Right. Dr. Orna, let me finish with you. That was a weird way to say that, but you are the meal that people have an appetite for. How does that feel? How do you see your role in this show, your role in the world? What is couples therapy allowing you to do that you weren't able to do before?
I think the main thing I'm doing is translating psychoanalytic thinking into sort of public discourse. That's what I see my role. And I feel very fortunate and grateful to be able to do that, because it's usually reserved to either to the tiny world of academia or to the few that can afford analytic treatment. And here suddenly it's something that we're offering in a way that is digestible, that is not kind of in an ivory tower. We're offering something that I think is incredibly valuable. I've devoted my life, it's my life project to psychoanalytic work and thinking. And it's a chance to share something that I think is super helpful, especially in the context of the world we live in now.
Right. Well, thank you, as always, for being our analytic interpreter, Dr. Orna. We do appreciate it. That's all the time we have today, Josh, Kim, Eli, Dr. Orna, and obviously, Andrea, thank you so much for all being here today. I cannot express to you what a lovely time it's been, and I appreciate you making time for us. So,
Wonderful. Thanks, Libby.
thank you so much.